Assalamualaikum brothers and sisters, welcome to another edition of the Saturday Night Dafs. Today I'll be reading from the 24th word, the fifth branch. Ala Rasulina Salawat. The fifth branch has 5 fruits. The first fruit. O my self-worshipping soul, O my world-worshipping friend, love is the cause of the universe's existence and what binds it. And it is both the light of the universe and its life. So, already it's talking about how Allah created humans and jinns to worship and love Him, and we need to be, we are the cause of the universe's existence due to our love for Him. So, if we weren't practicing, if there was no more worshipping, there would be no point in this universe's existence. Since man is the most comprehensive fruit of the universe, a love that will conquer the universe has been included in his heart, the seed of that fruit. Thus, only one possessing infinite perfection may be worthy of such an infinite love. So our infinite love should go to the one possessing infinite perfection. And who is that? That's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we shouldn't get that mixed up. And it's going to delve a little deeper into that in this first fruit as well. So we should love Allah, the all-knowing, the all-wise, the most merciful, the pre-eternal and post-eternal one. O soul and O friend, 2 faculties through which one may experience fear and love have been included in man's nature. This love and fear are bound to be turned towards either creatures or Creator. So our love and our fear are bound to be turned towards either creatures or the Creator. However, fear of creatures is a grievous affliction, while love for them is a calamitous tribulation. For you will fear people who will neither pity you nor accept your pleas for mercy. So fear is a grievous calamity. As for love, the one you love will either not recognize you or will depart you without bidding you farewell, like your youth and property. Or else he will despise you because of your love. Have you not noticed that in 99 out of 100 cases of metaphorical love, the lover complains about the beloved? And we see that everywhere. For to love and idolize worldly beloveds with the inner heart, which is the mirror of the eternally besought one, oppresses the beloved, and he finds it disagreeable and rejects it. Because man's nature rejects and casts away things that are contrary to it and unworthy of it. Physical loves are outside of our discussion. That is to say, the things you love will either not recognize you, or they will scorn you, or they will not accompany you. And that's pretty straightforward. We see that all the time. They will part from you in spite of you. Since this is so, direct your fear and love to the one by whom your fear will become pleasurable abasement and your love shadowless happiness. So what's it talking about here? It's telling us how if we are going to fear anything, we should fear Allah. And it's going to break down why that is the case. Yes, to fear the glorious Creator, which is Allah, means finding a way to His compassionate mercy and taking refuge in it. Fear is a whip. It drives you into the embrace of His mercy, of Allah's mercy. It is well known that a mother gently scares her infant, for example, and draws it to her breast. The fear is most pleasurable for the child because it drives him to her tender embrace. Whereas the tenderness of all mothers is but a flash of divine mercy. That means there is a supreme pleasure in fear of Allah. If there is such pleasure in fear of Allah, it is clear what infinite pleasure there is to be found in love of Allah. So I talked about fear of Allah. It's going to talk about love of Allah now as well. I think it was in the letters where it talks about the best of youth are those who act like the elderly. it's a good mindset to be in, because when you're young, it's easy to just go with the flow and think about secondary things that aren't really that important in the grand scheme of things. Whereas if you start to think like the elderly, where you know, okay, death can come at any time, you watch your step a lot more and you look to do more dhikr, you look to worship more. So it can help keep you on that right track and make you more mindful of what you're doing. And then once that becomes a habit, is when you start to see changes, because it's always front of your mind, which helps you stay on the right track. So it's a good place to be, and it's the reason why, one of the reasons why Ustad mentions that. Moreover, one who fears Allah is saved from the calamitous and distressing fear of others. Also, because it is for Allah's sake, the love he has for creatures is not tinged with sorrow and separation. I'll read that again. So also, because it is for Allah's sake, the love he has for creatures is not tinged with sorrow and separation. Indeed, man loves firstly himself, then his relations, then his nation, then living creatures, then the universe and the world. He is connected with all these spheres. He may receive pleasure at their pleasure and pain at their pain. However, since nothing is stable in this world of upheavals and revolutions swift as the wind, man's wretched heart is constantly wounded. So what's it touching on here? Again, it's telling us how nothing is stable in this world of upheavals. It's going to come back to it, but again, I think Ustad mentioned this in one of the books around the heart cannot derive pure pleasure from what is impermanent. So knowing that whatever you achieve in this life is always going to be temporary, when it's not got nothing to do with Islam, of course, is what I'm talking about. There'll always be a bit of pain there, because it's not going to last forever. So one, it touched on fear, and now it's touching on love. What I believe helps with love is showing gratitude, and happiness is a byproduct of gratitude. So the more grateful we are for what Allah has given us, it helps us stay on track. Okay, so the things his hands cling onto tear at them as they depart, even severing them. He remains in perpetual distress, or else plunges into heedless drunkenness. Since it is thus, my soul, if you have sense, gather together all those loves and give them to their true owner. So it's explained what happens, how you'll plunge into heedless drunkenness. And since that is the case, what's Ustad saying here? He's saying, have sense, gather together all those loves and give them to their true owner. Who's the true owner? Allah. Be saved from those calamities. It just reminds me how in this life so many people will always look for something that's going to give them spiritual happiness, and they'll try yoga, they'll try different retreats, dieting, whatever it might be, but none of that is something that gives them permanent happiness. And Ustad here is breaking down where we should go and to give all of our love to Allah. These infinite loves are particular to one possessing infinite perfection and beauty. When you give it to its true owner, again, it's Allah, you will be able to love everything without distress in His name and as His mirrors. That means this love should not be spent directly on the universe. Otherwise, while being a delicious bounty, it becomes a grievous affliction. There is another aspect besides, O soul, and it is the most important. You spend all your love on yourself. Again, look at the messaging all around us now, and it's all around loving yourself. What are you doing for you? It can easily trick us into that mindset subconsciously. So Ustad is bringing us back and making us think and show us how we should be thinking. You make your own soul your subject of worship and beloved. People The way they refer to themselves nowadays and nicknames they give to themselves is all to pump up the ego a little bit and to make them feel better. And again, it's touching on that. You sacrifice everything for your soul. Simply, you ascribe to it a sort of dominicality. Whereas the cause of love is either perfection, because perfection is loved for itself, or it is benefit, or it is pleasure, or it is goodness, or causes like these. Now, O soul, in several of the words, we have proved decisively that your essential nature is needed out of fault, deficiency, poverty, and impotence, and like the relative degree of darkness and obscurity shows the brightness of light, with regard to opposites, you act as a mirror through them to the perfection, beauty, power, and mercy of the beauteous Creator. That means, O soul, that it is not love you should have for your soul, but enmity. Or you should pity it, or after it is at peace, have compassion on it. If you love your soul because it is the source of pleasure and benefit, and you are captivated by their delights, do not prefer the pleasure and benefit of the soul, which is a mere jot, to infinite pleasures and benefits. Do not resemble a firefly, for it drowns all your friends and the things you love in the darkness of desolation, and suffices with a tiny glimmer in itself. You should love a pre-eternal beloved on whose gracious favours are dependent all the pleasures and benefits of your soul, together with all the benefits and bounties and creatures of the universe, which you are connected and from which you profit, and through whose happiness you are happy, so then you may take pleasure at both your own and their happiness, and receive an infinite pleasure from the love of the absolutely perfect one. He summarized it really, really well in that last paragraph. Anyway, your intense love for yourself and your soul is love for the divine essence which you misuse and spend on your own self. In which case, rend the egotism in your soul and show him. So again, I've touched on this in a different lecture, but it's again talking about our ego and getting rid of that ego in our soul and humbling ourselves, which is extremely important. That's touched on in a few different places. And there's a hadith on it. The strong are not those who defeat people, rather the strong are those who defeat their ego. All your loves dispersed through the universe are love given to you to spend on his names and attributes. You have used it wrongly and you are suffering the penalty. For the penalty for an illicit, misspent love is merciless torment. For sure, one particle of the love of a pre-eternal beloved who, through the names of the most merciful and compassionate, has prepared a dwelling like paradise adorned with hoodies for you, in which all your bodily desires will be gratified, and through others of his names has readied for you in that paradise everlasting favours that will satisfy all the longings of your spirit, heart, mind, and other subtle inner faculties, and in all of whose names are contained many treasuries of grace and munificence. One particle of his love may take the place of the whole universe. It's pretty profound and deep. So one particle of his love, so Allah's love, may take the place of the whole universe. But the universe cannot take the place of even a particular manifestation of his love. In which case, heed this pre-eternal decree, which that pre-eternal beloved caused his own beloved to announce, and follow it. If you love God, follow me, and God will love you. So that's extremely important. So it's saying love Allah and follow Allah. And think back to when we're thinking about loving Allah as well, we need to, if I go back a little bit, I was talking about having gratitude and showing gratitude and how it leads to happiness. So rather than being inclined to look at what you don't have, instead look at what you do have and be grateful for what you have that Allah has given us during our lifetimes. Like in Surah Ar-Rahman, it says, فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ, where it talks about which of the favors of your Lord will you deny. It's just talking about how there is no end to his favors and the mercy that he has shown us. And there's another a verse where it says, and whatever of blessings and good things you have, it is from Allah. So the more we can live by those verses and actually implement that in our daily lives, you become more grateful, and you've always got Allah at the front of mind. So it not only helps you in loving Allah more, but also fearing Allah, because it helps keep you on the right track. You don't want to do anything that you know is against Islam. So it helps keep you on track as well. Another one that I wanted to touch on was another verse from, it was, and he gave you from all you asked of him, and if you should count the favors of Allah, you could not enumerate them. Indeed, mankind is generally most unjust and ungrateful. So again, I was talking about flipping our mindset, but also when we hear these verses, not to think of them on a surface level, but dig a little bit deeper. And these books help us with that. So the more we read, the more we'll understand this, and just making sure we read it and take our time with it as opposed to reading it like a newspaper. Second fruit. O soul, worship is not the introduction to additional rewards, but the result of previous bounties. Yes, we have received our wage and are accordingly charged with the duties of service and worship. Because, O soul, since the all-glorious Creator, who clothed you in existence which is pure good, has given you a stomach and appetite through his name of provider, he has placed before you all foods on a table of bounties. Then, since he has given you a life decked out with senses, life too requires sustenance like a stomach. All your senses, like eyes and ears, are like hands before which he, Allah, has placed a table of bounties as broad as the earth. Then, because he has given you humanity, which requires many immaterial foods and bounties, he has laid out before that stomach of humanity, insofar as the hand of the mind can reach, an extensive table of bounties as broad as the worlds of both the inner and outer dimensions of things. Then, since he has given you Islam and belief, which require infinite bounties and are nourished through countless fruits of mercy and are supreme humanity, he has opened up before you a table of bounties, pleasures, and happiness, which includes the sphere of contingency together with the sphere of his sacred names and attributes. Then, through giving you love, which is a light of belief, he has bestowed on you an endless table of bounties, happiness, and pleasure. You know, as you're reading this, you start to think, how can I not be grateful? It goes back to what I was saying before. But the more you read, the more you understand how grateful we should be to Allah, that we can easily take for granted because of, you know, you're working through the day or you've got other commitments and we're checking other things out, like what's going on in the news or whatever it might be, and it might be on our mind. That's why at the end of the day, it's really important to, even if you just read one page, just to realign yourself and recognize what's important and understand what we should be doing on a day-to-day basis, and ask ourselves, you know, what have we done for the sake of Allah today to help keep us on track? That is to say, with regard to your corporeality, you are insignificant, weak, impotent, lowly, restricted, limited, particular, but through his favor, you have as though risen from being an insignificant particular to being a universal, luminous whole. So again, right there, you've got to humble yourself and not let your ego come into play and realize that we are impotent. Right now is the perfect time to actually do that, because In this day and age, everyone would always talk about how far advanced we are with technology, how far we've come, and how we're able to achieve so many great things. But then a plague has hit us, and just like that, we are all confined to living in our own houses. We can't leave, and things can change just like that. So it's an important reminder for us to stay on the right track and humble ourselves and realize that we are impotent. For by giving you life, Allah has raised you from particularity to a sort of universality. And by giving you humanity to true universality, and by bestowing Islam on you to an exalted, luminous universality, and by giving you knowledge and love of Him, He has elevated you to an all-encompassing light. Allahu Akbar. O soul, you have received this wage in advance. We've received this in advance, and you are charged with the pleasurable, bountiful, easy, and light duty of worship. See how we broke it down right there? You are charged with the pleasurable, bountiful, easy, and light duty of worship. Just worship Allah is our duty. But you are lazy in this too. Again, this is something that we need to ask ourselves right now. Are we still being lazy? So, right now you can say we're in a plague, right? So we can't leave our homes. We had the first wave in Australia that hit us. That meant we were living at home and you couldn't go outside. Did we turn back to Allah? Did we perfect our worship? Were we reading every night? Or did we continue on in the same manner as we were beforehand and just sitting on the couch and watching TV and watching the news? If we were, Allah has given us another chance now, given we're stuck at home in Melbourne for another 6 weeks. So what are we going to do with that time? Are we going to change, or are we going to continue on in those same habits that we had beforehand? So we got to make the most of this time period to make sure we continue to learn, we continue to educate ourselves, and continue on the right track. If you perform it half-heartedly, it is as though the former wages are insufficient for you and you are overbearingly wanting greater things. Also, you are complaining, "Why was my prayer not accepted?" But your right is not complaint, it is supplication. Through His pure grace and munificence, Almighty Allah bestows paradise and eternal happiness. So seek refuge in His mercy and munificence constantly. Trust in Him and heed this decree. So trust in Allah and heed this decree, which is a Quranic verse. Say, in the bounty of Allah and His mercy, in that let them rejoice. That is better than the wealth they hoard. I'm finishing up there. So there's some really good things to take away from this for all the brothers and sisters that want to read on their own. It's the 24th word, 5th branch. I'd highly recommend it. And like I said, take your time in reading it. And always remember that we should fear and love Allah above all things. Al-Fatiha.